Hi, welcome to 524 Week 3. This week we're talking about two big categories, two big topics: effective schools and then characteristics of at-risk youth. So it's incredibly perfect timing that we're talking about effective schools because I and six other people from my school up in the Bay Area flew down to San Diego to look at two effective schools: Design 39, which we're going to today, and High Tech High. So we spent all day yesterday at High Tech High. Can actually see the building outside my window right now, which is pretty crazy at this hotel. And there's a handful of things that stuck out. So before I do that, let's get a tiny bit out of the way. You have two chapters from the McWhorter, and then slides that go along with each one with that. There's a great TED Talk about reaching at-risk students from a teacher in the Bronx, talking about how gardening has really changed their classroom. Quick note on that: that link goes to the end of the video, so you have to rewind it. So sorry about that. Nothing is due this week assignment-wise. You still have your week 3 discussion boards, but you might want to get a head start looking at the resource binder part 1. That's due at the end of next week, the end of week 4. This week it's just the discussion boards. So the forums this week look at-risk students, and the other one is effective schools. Those two PowerPoint chapters, even though it's actually Google Slides, they're called PowerPoint Chapter 5 and 6, walk you through that pretty well. And a lot of what is in Chapter 5 I saw yesterday, and actually our school, Hillbrook School, where I work, does an amazing job of those things. So a couple things that really stuck out from High Tech High, which you've probably heard of. They're one of the more famous project-based schools. They get 5,000 guests each year. They obviously are doing project-based stuff. They're actually not that high-tech. We saw very, very few computers. They have a lot of campuses. They have high-tech elementary. They have, I think, 2 middle schools and then 3 high schools, all within walking distance. So we got to see all of those yesterday. So the projects stuck out a lot. I was surprised that elementary is actually more traditional in the morning. And then after lunch, they start in the project work. So if you're thinking about what you can do to try and make your classroom more effective, that could be an easy way to dip your toes. One thing that our school started doing last year, and it's just really taking off this year, is a version of Genius Hour or 20% time. Every grade calls it a couple different things. So like there's Ace Hour, that's ask, create, explore. First and second grade call it Ice Time, Inquire, Create, Explore, some version of that. We have independent electives in sixth grade, and now they can do their passion projects. That's another name for it. But the idea is that students are in charge of their learning, and they guide it. Not all the time, but our schools just try it in a small way. I say, I'm really curious about like one student in third grade. I'm really curious about how a candle burns in zero gravity. Right, so I was actually able to Google that. That wasn't a particularly difficult question, but just this really interesting question, right? And then just diving really deep into that. So really, I think the way the teacher or I've offered to help with a bunch of the different classes as tech director. So they have another adult in campus being able to help them out. I'll come in and be like, all right, well, let's actually take a look at how candles burn, what the wick does, what the wax does, why anything burns. Does it burn this way? Does it burn this way? And really going into like a deep inquiry around like how candles work, why we need wax, and all of those types of things. So I think that nearly any grade level can have a version of this like student chosen inquiry. Another way you can do it, and our 8th grade science teacher does an amazing job of this. I'm actually working on a podcast for our school to share a story about this, is that he has this idea about what he wants students to be able to do, and like within this like big unit goal, he's not going to be able to cover all the topics. So he lets the students choose what that topic is and what direction they go. So he wants to talk about like creek life in the watershed, right? So a year ago, students were super into arthropods and being able to find those along the creek. We actually have a creek that goes through our campus. So they spent like a month just working on it and ended up writing a song about it as a class. The song's called Creatures. His name's Brian Revisa. If you want to do a quick YouTube search on it, I'll also link to it in our notes. Uh, but that only happened that year. This year students are taking a different path. They're really into this idea of they're called sit spots, right? So they have this, I forget what it is, like a square meter of ground, and they spend most of the year, I don't know how often they do it, but most of the year observing it and keeping a journal on this 3 foot by 3 foot square piece of ground somewhere on campus. And they're super into that, so that becomes kind of the focus of that. All the while, like the bigger issue that Brian wants his 8th grade science students to have, that gets addressed, right? But they're able to personalize it as a class, and each student has a slightly different kind of take on it, um, so that it's more meaningful to them. So a lot of what I got out of chapter 5, um, I think that what I just shared is a really interesting and powerful angle of how to make schools more effective. We have a new strategic plan at our school also, and student choice and engagement are at the center of the visual we have. I think we even wrote student choice and engagement are at the center and put it in the center. And then we have these 4 things around us: ask, start, collaborate, show, which is really cool. Like, feel free to use that, by the way. I think it's good teaching, right? So there's a lot of overlap with what we're doing with what High Tech High was doing. They tend to work more in projects and give students a lot of flexibility. They also have a lot of teacher collaboration. So when they're not doing the more traditional stuff, the humanities teacher, right? So it's not just English. Humanities and the math science teacher will pair up, and they have that flexibility because that's really 4 different classes, right? So instead of being 4 separate teachers, you get 2 teachers, and they can come together and have the kids for 4 straight hours. So what the school has done is just created that structure, but then given that flexibility to teachers. And I was actually surprised how much, I keep pointing because I can still see it, it's so cool, how much flexibility High Tech High gives teachers, not necessarily students, but teachers, to develop this project and have that time during the school day to get that project done. So in science class, it's pretty rare that a teacher would ever just stand up and lecture about science. They'll create a problem or a project where students will have to learn science along the way. Um, so I hope that adds a little bit to what chapter 5 was about. Chapter 6 is pretty straightforward, talking about characteristics of high and low risk children and youth. So I'm not going to touch on that in this video. I do encourage you to get started on assignment 4, because part 1 is due at the end of week 4. Also, a quick reminder about the week 3 discussions, and look forward to hearing what you have to share in those discussion boards. Have a great week.